Well, hi there. I'm Dr. Tom Ulrich, and I like to talk about leadership and engineering. Well, look at this. It's Christmas time, and I have a box from Amazon. Let's open it up and take a look and see what's inside. Holy smokes! Someone sent me stress. Well, let's try to understand something about stress, shall we? So the first thing need to know about stress is there's four things that are called antecedents to stress. Now this information is taken from the Bass Handbook of Leadership, which by the way is a great reference. It's a monster. It's the size of a big old phone book. I realize millennials will like, what's a phone book? Well, it's a thing. But anyway, it's 1,000 pages of a summary of literature, of research. Anyway, so the first thing to know about the antecedents of stress is this. What comes before stress? Oh, and let me stop for a second. What the heck is stress? Oh, come on. How can you ask that question? We all know what stress is. If you need a definition, let's go with this. Professor Kelly McGonigal at Stanford, she says it this way. She says, stress is what arises when something you care about is at stake. And we know what stress is. It's not quite an emotion, but it's that sort of, very, very concerned sort of state. At any rate, what are the antecedents of stress? What sort of things typically lead to stress? So, first of all, conflict, for sure. Anxiety, if someone's anxious, that can end up in stress, frustration, and fear. Now, so those are sort of the general antecedents. Segev and Schwartz, some leadership researchers, they studied and they asked a more specific question. What causes stress in the workplace? And what they found is that there really is typically three major causes of stress, at least in their study, and they have to do with the role you're in. So we're engineers, and so as the role of engineers, what sort of things cause stress? Well, the first thing is role conflict, and the idea there is sort of whose responsibility is this? Who's supposed to be doing this? Um, it's very, very important as an engineering manager that everybody has a sense of what they're supposed to be doing. Even in self-directing teams, there still needs to be it may be as simple as saying, what I expect is for you guys to kind of sort it out. But to leave people with a sense of, there's two people over us who are disagreeing, and I'm caught in the middle, and I don't know which one to listen to. I mean, this will result in employee stress. The second thing is role ambiguity, where it's not so much about does Bob do this or Ted do this, but it's role ambiguity is more just of a sense of I don't even know what my job is. I'm not sure where I fit in the organization. By the way, this is why I always tell people it's a very good idea if you have an organization with more than 4 or 5 people to, on the first day of the job, give them an organizational chart. Show them where they fit. I know some people don't like to draw. They always have some reason that they don't want to do it. But the bottom line is people need to feel like they know what their job is. The third one, and this is the one that really doesn't come as a surprise to anybody, is role overload, where you're simply asked to do more than you ever could. Now, what are the signs of stress? Why do we think stress is a problem? Well, there's a couple things, and this again is from the Bass Handbook, which is stress leads to absenteeism. So you'll find people missing more days of work, and that costs the organization money. You'll find an increase in irritability, more conflict, sort of, and that's interesting, right? Because one of the antecedents of stress is conflict, and one of the results of stress is conflict. And so what you see is this is an unstable situation. This is a situation that is amplifying, and stress can really take over an organization. When they're stressed, you can get increased confusion. Again, role ambiguity causes stress. Stress causes confusion, which is kind of like role ambiguity. So the message here is it's very important to not ignore stress. It will build, and it will build in a nonlinear way. Also, what we know about stress is it causes more mistakes. Now, another thing about stress is Actually, this was a big part of my PhD dissertation. Is I was looking at the effects of leader stress, leader anger, leader sadness, leader happiness on a couple things, kind of on the group as well as the individual. So my point here is part of what I looked at in my original research for my dissertation was the impact of a leader being stressed. And I'm not going to give you the complete list of what I found, but here's three of the things that were very, very clear from the data. First one is to realize that the leader themselves can be a major source of stress, and it's through this mechanism. Stress is contagious. If you're a leader and you're experiencing stress, your people will feel the stress. Emotion contagion, mood contagion is a real thing. It's really been measured. It's science. And not only is it science, but that grandfather clock in the background, that's science too. Wait, no, that was just poor planning on my part. At any rate, if you're a leader and you're feeling stress, your people will feel it too. What we know is stress distracts workers. It shifts their focus. And here's one of the interesting things I found. There were some people who reported that stress really sort of almost disables them from working. Other people in the study reported almost with pride that they have strategies for dealing with a stressed boss. But the interesting thing about it is I asked more questions. What I found is they were taking all their creative focus and putting it on dealing with their supervisor rather than dealing with technical problems. So the problem is, yes, they figured out how to not let the stress get them down, but at what price? And the price was not focusing on their job. And the most concerning, especially if you're working in aerospace or medical devices or anything like that, is when the leader's stressed, worker willingness to report problems, even severe problems, even things where the product is dangerous, they decrease their willingness to report. And interestingly, there's two different reasons people do that. Some people, as you would expect, they kind of go into sort of a self-protective mode where they don't want to incur the leader's wrath, so they just shut their mouth. Others actually report feeling bad for their supervisors, and they feel sort of a humane thing of like, this leader is miserable. The last thing I want to do is add to his or her stress. But in either case, what you find is a decreased willingness to report problems. Okay, so those are some of the things about stress. Now, one last thing is you need to realize stress has an impact on worker productivity. So what I've shown in this graph here is on the x-axis is stress, and the productivity is that sort of shape. And so what happens is as stress goes up, initially you see an increase in productivity. And usually the best workers already know this, and they have a way of putting stress on themselves. And so what you'll find is your most productive workers, your most reliable workers, they create for themselves, and they'll usually refer to it as a sense of urgency. It's just stress, but they will create stress, and that's part of their scheme for getting them to be more productive. Now, what you have to realize is when you have these very good employees who naturally do that, if you add your stress to it, you decrease their productivity. And so that's some of the big news here is, we tend to think by being stressed, it shows that we care. And what we don't realize is you can really do harm to the individuals on your team. You can do harm to the productivity. I mean, you can really prevent your team from being effective simply by allowing yourself to get stressed. So really, the bottom line here is, I would say this. As a leader, what you'll probably find is sometimes the most important thing you can do for your team is to simply remain calm. You have to realize that when you allow yourself to get stressed, and you have a choice here, your emotions will always follow your decisions. Sometimes we talk about emotional intelligence. One of the key components there is emotional regulation. You are not a victim of your emotions. Your emotions will come around. You can regulate your emotions. You can regulate your stress. And sometimes by simply choosing to remain calm and really not be stressed, you don't add it on the team, and you can avoid this whole array of problems. So my encouragement, my challenge to every engineering manager is recognize um, often the best thing you can do for your team is simply not be stressed. At any rate, there's a whole set of things on how to kind of regulate yourself and self-help books, and maybe I'll do a video on that. But make no mistake about it, you can't get stressed without making a decision to allow yourself to get stressed. It is possible to remain calm, and that's really where you want to be. At any rate, I'm Dr. Tom Ulrich. I'm the engineering leadership guy. Hopefully that helped. If you like this video, there's more on my website, tomulrichconsulting.com. If you're on YouTube, you can just search on either Engineering Leadership Guy or you can search on Dr. Tom Ulrich. Those seem to work. At any rate, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.